AITA for refusing to fire my nanny and telling my husband I would rather divorce him than fire her. My husband John, 40 millions, and I, 26 Fahrenheit, have been together 5 years, married for 3, and have 3 kids, ages 3 Mo's, 2, 4. We met when I was still in college working part-time as a nanny for his friend's family. We crossed paths a few times at my nanny family's functions, and my nanny family gave him my number and encouraged me to go out with him. Initially, I only did because I didn't want to offend them, but we ended up hitting it off really well. I accidentally got pregnant with my oldest about a year into seeing him. 3 kinds of birth control and still got pregnant. What are the chances, huh? At first I was devastated because I was just about to graduate and had already been offered an amazing internship in my field. The internship would require me to move across the country, and so I was already planning to leave my current job and break up with John so I could pursue my dream job. So my initial plan was to terminate the pregnancy. However, long story short, I ended up staying with John and having my oldest, but under the agreement that I would. As soon as my son was born, I fell instantly in love, and the few resentments I had about the way things turned out completely disappeared. While I did stay home with him for the first year because I couldn't stand to leave him for more than a few hours, I was open with John about my plans to find a job in my field as soon as I could, and he was always on board and never expressed any issue with it. John and I got married when my oldest was 1, and John started pushing me to have more kids, but I refused because I felt ready to start working. I ended up getting a really great job offer at the company I'm still with today. I started looking for nannies and was put in contact with our current nanny, Sarah, 21 Fahrenheit. She has honestly been a godsend. She is the sole reason I made it through being apart from my baby, and she does such an amazing job I honestly cannot imagine my life without her. AITA for refusing to fire my nanny and telling my husband I would rather divorce him than fire her. My husband John, 40 millions, and I, 26 Fahrenheit, have been together 5 years, married for 3, and have 3 kids, ages 3 Mo's, 2, 4. We met when I was still in college working part-time as a nanny for his friend's family. We crossed paths a few times at my nanny family's functions, and my nanny family gave him my number and encouraged me to go out with him. Initially, I only did because I didn't want to offend them, but we ended up hitting it off really well. I accidentally got pregnant with my oldest about a year into seeing him. 3 kinds of birth control and still got pregnant. What are the chances, huh? At first, I was devastated because I was just about to graduate and had already been offered an amazing internship in my field. The internship would require me to move across the country, and so I was already planning to leave my current job and break up with John so I could pursue my dream job. So my initial plan was to terminate the pregnancy. However, long story short, I ended up staying with John and having my oldest, but under the agreement that I would start working ASAP and John would pay for childcare so I didn't have to be a som and permanently walk away from career goals that I had worked very hard toward for basically my whole life. As soon as my son was born, I fell instantly in love, and the few resentments I had about the way things turned out completely disappeared. While I did stay home with him for the first year because I couldn't stand to leave him for more than a few hours, I was open with John about my plans to find a job in my field as soon as I could, and he was always on board and never expressed any issue with it. John and I got married when my oldest was 1, and John started pushing me to have more kids, but I refused because I felt ready to start working. I ended up getting a really great job offer at the company I'm still with today. I started looking for nannies and was put in contact with our current nanny, Sarah, 21 Fahrenheit. She has honestly been a godsend. She is the sole reason I made it through being apart from my baby, and she does such an amazing job I honestly cannot imagine my life without her. Shortly after I started my job, I accidentally got pregnant again, another birth control baby. And my husband tried to talk me into staying home with the kids again after my second was born, but I was too happy with my job. They offered to let me WFH part-time, which worked out perfectly. My husband wanted to cut back Sarah's hours as I would be home a lot more, but I refused because while I'd be able to breastfeed and help take care of my newborn, I still wanted her there to help with our rambunctious toddler while I was working. Our arrangement worked out really well, and I recently did the same with our 3rd baby, while Sarah watches the older 2 during the days when I'm working. Sarah and I get along great. We have a lot in common and I see her as a friend as much as an employee. My kids love her very much and ask about her whenever she isn't there. Since I was also a nanny, I am able to work with her effectively, and I have so much respect and admiration for the job she does with my kids, as she's even more patient and hands-on than I ever was with my nanny family's kids. Even though we pay her a lot, I honestly think she's worth even more than that, and I tip her as much as I can. For some reason, my husband does not feel the same way. He is very critical of her, not to her face. He has very little interaction with her, as most days she leaves before he gets home. To me, he is always nitpicking how she does things, like if a few toys get left out in the playroom, if she used too much gas in the car, if she got fast food for the kids instead of cooking them a meal, etc. He tells me she is not worth what we're paying her, and that she's doing an easy job I was fine doing for free. This irritates me like nothing else, because while yes, I don't find looking after my kids particularly difficult, I wouldn't call it remotely easy. And it's much different when it comes to dedicating most of your free time to looking after someone else's kids. And Sarah goes above and beyond to make sure my kids are safe, happy, and entertained every day, and even does some preschooling with them. Last week, my husband confronted me with some of the footage from our security cameras of Sarah neglecting our kids. The whole thing was completely ridiculous. There was one video where she left my Yo in her high chair crying for 5 minutes while taking my Yo to the bathroom 3 feet away. There was one where she let them stay up past bedtime to finish a movie while she worked on schoolwork. All relatively innocuous things like that I couldn't care less about. The worst of it was a video of her texting on her phone for like 30 minutes while my kids were playing, which we have asked her to not be on the phone while playing with the kids. But even though she technically did something wrong, she's a human being. She's not going to be perfect 100% of the time. Once he was done showing me, I asked him, "Is the neglect in the room with us right now?" And that made him really mad. He accused me of not caring about our children's well-being, because if I did, I would agree with him that we need to fire her. I told him we're firing her over my dead body, and if it wasn't for her, our children would actually be neglected because we both work full-time. He told me that Sarah was trying to take over my role as a mother in my children's eyes, and she was coming between me and our family, and if I cared about our family, I would want to fire her too. I laughed in his face and told him I would rather divorce him and pay for her myself than fire her and quit my job. He stormed out and hasn't spoken to me since. AITA, edit. Thank you so much to everyone who has offered advice and support. I'm trying to read over everyone's comments and process everything. Honestly, I thought this was just an annoying ongoing argument between myself and my husband about our nanny. But you all have opened my eyes to a much deeper issue. Firstly, I want to say I'm a bit worried it came across like I resent getting pregnant or having kids, because I really don't. I love my kids more than anything, and I would not trade them for the life I wanted before or choose my job over them if it ultimately came to that. I do stress about the accidental pregnancies a lot because it makes me feel out of control of my own life and body, but I hope that doesn't come across as me having regrets over them. The last thing I want is for people to think my kids are a burden who have ruined my life because they are a gift and have brought more love to my life than I knew I was capable of. I really don't feel trapped by them or anything like that. On that note, however, a lot of people have pointed out the possibility of my husband tampering with my birth control. This has me really shaken up, I'm not going to lie. The scariest thing about this is that he's a medical professional and started writing my scripts for Before Christ after we got married. And he often recommends and prescribes me supplements and things for my health. He also convinced me that IUDs were dangerous and ineffective, and that it's not uncommon to get pregnant on Before Christ if you're extremely fertile. I don't even want to think about the implications of him having messed with something to get me pregnant. I trust him a lot with medical decisions and opinions, and while I know he's not as vigilant about birth control as I am, I didn't even consider the chance he was actively sabotaging it. Not really sure where to go from here or how to investigate this further. Many of you were concerned about having an emergency fund, safety plan, and I do keep my finances separate from his, and luckily I make good enough money that I could leave if I really needed to. Thank you again to everyone who commented. I will try to update for those of you who asked.
Raisins Rock NTA, your husband says Sarah is Doing an easy job I was fine doing for free, the I being you, which shows he puts no value on your career or happiness outside of the roles of wife and mother. Since you make enough money to cover her wages, it's not about the money. He wanted you to be a som and you wouldn't have brought in any income. Sounds like he wanted a trade wife too and probably thought with each baby, now she'll stay home and do her real job. I can't see this going anywhere good. I don't know what his problem is unless he thinks you and Sarah are having an affair. Start pestering him about quitting his job to be Assad. Representative Ger 250. There are so many problems with this. Firstly, her old employers suck for trying to persuade her to date their friend. That's so inappropriate. More so with the age gap. The abuse of the power dynamic is gross. Giving out her number without permission is wrong. Second, it's highly suspect that she planned to move for her internship and break up with him and then fell pregnant whilst using 3 kinds of birth control. It screams baby trapping. Third, he wanted her to stay home and push for more kids right away. When she refused to give up on her career dreams and had just gotten a great job, she fell pregnant whilst using birth control again. Now, Op doesn't say if baby number 3 was another birth control baby, but I think she should be checking to see if it's been tampered with. And get on a form of birth control no one else can access. The whole thing just seems like he wanted someone young and naive who would do what he wants and that he could control through money. At least Op was smart enough to stick to her guns on having her career and going to work. I think the idea of ditching the husband and keeping the nanny is spot on. Fuzzy, honestly, the fact that he actively tried to convince her that IUDs, one of the most effective forms of before Christ, are dangerous and ineffective, screams baby trapping to me. And he's the one that prescribes her before Christ, and she has gotten pregnant on 3 forms of before Christ. Also, getting pregnant on before Christ because you are extremely fertile is not a thing, and he knows that. He knows it's improper usage that leads to pregnancy, just as every other person on BC has learned when they started using. Also, doctors have to warn you about possible side effects and complications that come with using before Christ. It's part of their job to explain to patients that there is a risk of getting pregnant if you skip pills or miss doses, etc. They have to let patients know possible complications or side effects so that patients can make informed decisions about their care. All those issues are also listed in the pharmaceutical information that comes with the medication too. So I would not be surprised if he got rid of that information so that she couldn't and or didn't have a reason to question him. If he did that, that's also an abuse of his power as a medical professional. There are just way too many red flags and anomalies here for me to believe he didn't actively sabotage her before Christ in order to get her pregnant so she would stay. You are not the Ajab. If I were you, I would immediately switch to a gynecologist for your care. Loving life at Miage. Oh dear Lord, there's nothing as blind as those who can or won't see. Open your eyes and see what your husband has been doing to you for the past few years. You were never intended to be a working wife. You were chosen very carefully by this man. You were chosen all those years ago by a man, nearly 20 years your senior, to be molded into what he wanted. He wasn't interested in your career goals. It sounds like you ticked all of his boxes for the mother of his children. You are no doubt very pretty, obviously intelligent. You're young enough to have plenty of children for him, etc. His plan was for you to be his brood mare, stay at home with his kids and look pretty. Where he slipped up, thank God, is that you are obviously a very determined young woman. He either didn't factor that in, or was confident you would be too busy with the babies. And an accidental pregnancy when you're on 3 types of birth control, Weiss. Really? Do you really truly believe he never ever interfered with your birth control? Don't you find it a coincidence that you got pregnant as you were planning to first leave him, then secondly consolidate your job position? Was your third an accident as well? He's really determined to tie you to that kitchen sink, isn't he? Now it's your nanny he's trying to get rid of. He'll maybe accuse her of stealing next or something equally as heinous. Or your job is going to be targeted. Whatever, he's determined your career isn't going much further. You'll be out from under his control then. I hope you're on solid birth control, such as the shot or patch, something he can't interfere with. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself accidentally pregnant again. Hope your husband is the worst sort of predator. It sounds as though he'll do anything to get rid of that girl and force you to stop working. Be very careful he doesn't ruin her future life and prospects in his bid to get rid of her. The very way he started pursuing you is vile. How dare your ex-employers give your number to a man twice your age? They should have been protecting you. BT to you. I wouldn't be the least surprised if you discover eventually that he's having sex outside of your marriage. He sounds like that sort of person. I really hope you have your own bank account and you're in charge of your own money. You'll need a fund ready for when you wake up smell the coffee, and realize you've been baby trapped and your future career prospects torn away from you.